If you could just give people some context to where tendercare is at in terms of looking for funding, where we're at in the raise, and just your thoughts on this whole process and diligence and all things fundraising.
Yeah. Well, first, I think, especially when you think about it in the context of innovation, invention, building, this always requires some upfront investment. It's going to be some combination of resources, capital, and especially when you're talking about technology, this has changed somewhat since the sort of launch of tools like Claude Code. But there is always a sort of set amount of investment a founding team is going to need to be able to bring whatever vision they have of a new solution into the world. And so tendercare was very much in this zone. We realized very early when I first founded the business, it's expensive to build. And so to build, especially a platform in which we're imagining bringing millions of families into one place and actually delivering value to them, that comes down to needing to hire really talented engineers and to be able to have a certain amount of time in which you can, get subscriptions to some of the important tools, the vendors and the services that you need your platform to be running on. And so raised venture capital very early, in the very earliest stages of tendercare. And this was our first contact with a very important part of any founder's journey, which is how well can you tell your story? How well can you articulate the plan and the vision for what this new future is going to look like with your tools, your platform, your set of services that you're bringing to market? And what are the requirements in order to be a venture-backed company then? There's a very specific set of requirements. Not every business is meant to be venture scale. There's many amazing businesses that are Main Street USA or are small to medium. And so it's, I think the best way to describe it is almost like rocket fuel, right? So you only want rocket fuel if you're planning on building a rocket ship. If you have a pickup truck, you want diesel or you want gas or ideally electric, right? And so I think it really depends on what's the size of the ambition on the other side, and does venture make a lot of sense? And so for us, we knew this is a gargantuan problem. Chris, you and I have experienced this firsthand. What does this look like for families to feel supported through helping care for a loved one? What tools do they really need? There's a lot of us. So it was like, oh, wow, this is a big problem. This is going to require a big solution. So a big solution is going to require some real dollars behind it. So we are currently in our next moment. These are little windows of time in which the business, the team pops out, looks around, and looks for our next set of partners, right? And these are typically investors, they're venture capital firms that are looking for solutions, teams like ours who are out on the front edge of building. And the ideal is when you meet a perfect match. You have a team that finds the right investors that are looking for them, the two lock in, and then you get funding, which then fuels the next chapter of growth for that business. In our case, it's continuing our mission of bringing even more families onto our platform, bringing more providers who help with different services and elder care into one place, to really matching up our families to all of the different reimbursement programs that are out there. Dementia and Alzheimer's being just the first that we've started with. And so along with that, there is a whole set of different, I would call them chores, that any founding team has to do. They feel like chores for me, which is, really demonstrating that we're going to be using this capital wisely. Like that's ultimately what it is. Do we have a plan are we just asking for money or do we actually have a plan? Does it have a relative chance of success, right? Why us? Why now? What does this look like in terms of a financial model? How clearly can we tell our story? How could, you're talking often to someone who's seeing, 20 different companies every week, and you only have 30 minutes to really explain a whole category, sometimes a whole new type of technology, a new way of helping people. So you got to be able to tell that story pretty quickly. And then how can you bring the product to life, right? So these are all kinds of things like product demos, it's a means for being able to then educate and make sure that you're finding the right match out in the market. Now with this, it's a crazy game for founding teams, and anyone who's going through a fundraise, I think will probably be weighing a lot of the similar things our team is, which is you don't have unlimited time to be able to go out there and find your right partners. And so you're in a mode of being very active in sense of timing. It's a tremendous amount of energy. You don't want to be spending too much of it, but also it requires it to find the right match. How much time do you want to start raising with? So that way you've got a lot of time to go out and have these conversations, find the right partners, ask the right questions. And so we're in it right now. We're actively having conversations with, a number of different partners, that some of which I'm so excited by, truly excited by, just the depth of knowledge and expertise. Like, one of the things that I don't think gets talked about enough is how valuable it is to match with the right partner on the investment side. We've been really lucky. We've been through 2 rounds already at this point. And so some of those who are now part of the tendercare story, who are active investors, I don't think we'd be here without them, right? But it took a lot to find them. And so similarly, we're kind of like amping ourselves up for what that effort looks like right now. You're searching for your exact right partner in a crowded ballroom, ultimately. And, most teams will say the same thing. Like, when you know. Maybe it's a little bit like falling in love. Like, there's a lot of questions when you're not in love, and that's because you're not in love, right? But when you're in love, it's like you don't need a playbook for that. You just know, and then everything locks into place, and you move to the next zone or the next level.
I think there's a lot of crossover in both of the people that we're speaking to right now. One being founders and people who are in startups and in the tech world, and two, the second piece of that are the caregivers who are listening to this. I want to speak to the caregivers first. What does all of this funding and talking to all of these companies mean for a family caregiver if we can make it through this period?
I mean, money is energy, right? That's all it is stored energy. And so when our team is going out and ready to accept capital in to fuel the next chapter, what that means is more features, more ability to really lean in and support. And here we get so many requests, right, every week for new things to modify or change or make, just a little bit easier inside of our platform. Like a PDF for a doctor of all medications, right? Like, we hear these things all the time. What that is the energy to be able to go out there and do that, right? And just say, yes, we've heard you, we're on it, we've got this for you. So for us, it's really just taking that and being like, hey, we're ready to take on some more stored energy. And now we're going to go out and put that into the world in new ways to earn our right to be valuable for the families that we serve.
Do you find that it's hard to remember that when you're in the middle of talking to a firm that's asking you all these questions that maybe sometimes don't have anything to do with caregivers because they're not using caregiver language and they're using the language of money? Do you forget sometimes, or is it hard to reframe or find the connection point between the money and the caregivers that we serve?
It's such a great question. Well, I got into this because I felt like caregiving, which was a rich man's sport. It didn't feel fair to me that caregiving was often so expensive. There was such a high cost in terms of decisions, whether to go for that promotion, how much things just actually cost, sacrifices of like, if you're going to spend for a loved one, what does that mean for you in terms of your ability to take a honeymoon? And I was just like, this doesn't feel fair, This feels way too hard. I'm okay with things being hard, but this feels like way too hard. And so money is an active part of caregiving all the time. We're constantly making trade-offs around money, because part of what we're doing is we're often delivering services that we're not getting paid for, right? And we're doing that instead of getting paid for doing something else. We're choosing that as being something that's more important to us. And often on the other side, the way that we are caring for our loved ones is really expensive, right? And especially if you don't know about some of these options like long-term care insurance ahead of time, then, things add up really fast. So I think money has always been a part of this. One of the first actions I took with my dad as soon as he was diagnosed was I was like, oh man, I got to get a handle on his finances. Like, where are their credit cards? Where are there going to be late payments? I need to make sure that we're not just stacking up bills now because nobody's watching the store. So for me, money has always been a part of the story, but from like a deeply personal, protective way. We want to make sure our loved ones are safe. And oftentimes this is the first place that they get scammed or they get taken, right? And so in that regard, no, that it's very connected to me. On the second side of like speaking finance as a love language, as someone who was an English major and creative writing minor and, spent so much of my time thinking through storytelling, it's not it's not my first native language, right? But I see it as a language, right? Which is ultimately the means to be able to tell a story. And so part of my own journey in being able to build tendercare, it's important to be fluent in this. And I think not only is it stored energy, but it's also a great metric for value, right? How well have we been able to lock into the system, create real value? What does this look like? How are we making sure that we are aligned with both how we're thinking about growth and how we're thinking about delivering value to families? Because that's where the real power and impact and staying endurance comes from, right? And so I actually think it's been a really interesting journey for me to think through the lens of unit economics and flywheels and compounding growth in thinking about care. And it's pushed me to go from something that is often felt so intuitive and so emotionally driven, which is like, of course we're going to take care of the people we love, and of course we're going to be motivated and not consider whether we're being paid to do this effort or not, and then translate that into, well, there's real value to this effort, this energy that we're all putting off, that we're choosing to do. There's real cost behind what we're purchasing on behalf of our loved ones. Where can tender care fit in to be a driver in both making that easier for a family, but also driving growth in the right ways, right, for this sector? Where are the zones that we really want to put our finger on the weight for different businesses and make sure that this entire industry is kind of moving by the right dynamics that we agree to, which is empowering families, making sure that they understand what decisions they have, making sure that when they are going to spend $1, it's going to be $1 with the right type of professional, the right provider that's really earned their right to be able to serve that family. These are really exciting things. And I think whether we talk about it in terms of one family story or we talk about it in terms of the total economic impact, either way, they're both part of the same coin.
In the conversation, you talked about just as a founder, you need to be able to deliver your story in the best way possible to these investors. What is a light bulb that goes off for these people when you're in these rooms, when you're telling the story of tender care and why tender care needs to exist?
I think there's two different things that no one disagrees with, which is this is hitting all of us, right? 1 in 5 of our family members are turning 65, right? This is going to happen for the next 20 years, around 10 to 11,000 of our parents, our spouses, they're starting to move into an age in which care becomes a real consideration. So that piece, like immediate agreement. I think the second piece is that this is a whole zone of life that is like pretty uncategorized at this point. There's not a lot of organization around thinking about, senior move managers and real estate agents with the right certification to serve seniors, or home care and mobile dentistry. These are not things that oftentimes go hand in hand in anywhere that's easily findable today. So the idea that these are actually services many of us will want to purchase at some point, and that they're very hard to find, that they actually are kind of scattered to the wind today. That's also an area where I get a lot of immediate acknowledgement. And when you start to stack up the dollars on that, even home care, like I've seen this with my own dad in California, this is not cheap, right? Like if I move up to 24-hour care in California, you are looking at around 30 grand a month to be able to do this with someone full-time who's able to step in and make sure that your loved one is safe. Now, many of us are stepping in other ways. We're working from home, we're like pitching in. So you don't see the total cost of this because we're making do and we're figuring it out. But this stuff is really expensive. And so I think where I also see a lot of enthusiasm is like, hey, one, there's a lot of us. Two, we can do this so much better. And three, there's a real business to be made by doing this a lot better for everyone.
And your thesis is that if we do this better, that drives the cost down for taking care of a loved one and or needing or finding help for care for a loved one.
I mean, even think about some of the services that we were talking about in some of our meetings earlier today, right? Really pushing families to consider health and fitness, right? After a fall, to consider home safety. These are proactive measures. These are actually not that expensive. I just installed safety bars at my dad's house. And I think the total, and this was like safety bars in every bathroom, I think it was a couple $1,000s. And like, granted, that's not free, but do you know how much less expensive that is than my dad falling and breaking his hip and then not being able to walk, and then all of the extra care our family's going to need if that happens? Like, these are proactive measures that have such important downstream effects of being able to like approach this whole experience much more proactively, more cost effectively. Because when you plan, now you've got more options on the table. So yeah, the idea is that we're now able to be a co-pilot for a family. We're recommending these things, we're explaining why these are valuable, why the investment up front is valuable, and then what that actually saves them longer term down the road. Similarly, like long-term care insurance, my family would have saved so much money if my dad had had a plan for this, and there was probably a couple of years there where like we kind of knew something was going on, but I just had never even heard of long-term care insurance. So like most of us out there, right? By the time it finally dawned on me, I'd been working in the industry for however many years, and it was way too late. We'd already had the diagnosis, and a lot of that isn't possible on the other side of a diagnosis. So the dream here is that every family knows so much more than any of us ever did about what cards they have to play, what makes most sense for them, what options are on the table. And then on the other side, we can now hand select who are the best possible professionals that are out there waiting, ready to step in and serve these families, and just put a giant spotlight on them so that families know, like, this is who you go to. This is who deserves your dollars, right? And that's how it should be. It should always be what professionals have earned their right to deserve your dollars, because this stuff is super expensive. And so when you're going to make an investment, you want to make sure that's like the best possible quality investment you can make on behalf of besides it's your loved ones, right? So only the best for them.
You talk about, or I've seen you interact with a lot of our trusted network members these past few weeks. Can we ship them some love and talk about what you've been seeing, what you've been learning, your interactions with them? There's so many great people that we work with.
They really are. They are who are funding and fueling our mission right now. These are the first believers in doing this in a different way. And our trusted network members, they've gone through so much work to be on our platform. They've allowed us to background check them, vet them, audit them. We've asked them to upload all of their licensing. How do they train their staff? What's the risk policies? Like, this is not easy. And then on top of that, we asked them to pay us for the privilege of doing that. So we're really their favorites. No, the fact that we have had so many who've been willing to do this with open arms, they believe in a different way. You know, Ann Sansevero, Rick Gang over at Holistic Home Care. You know, there's so many amazing leaders. There's, Nina Herndon over in San Francisco, Jen Bockel, who just raised so much money for the Alzheimer's Association in such a fun way in Westchester. She brought together 4 other Trusted Network members to sponsor the event, opened it up to the community. There's so many demonstrations of leadership. I think it's really important to call it out. And I feel so lucky that our customers, our earliest believers, are those that I feel so proud to have associated with tendercare. They're truly community builders. These are the types of business owners you want to work with. It's so much more than a job for any of them. They make it so abundantly clear. So I think my thoughts are just, there's so many good people out there. And I think, all of us know this. When you hire someone to do something for you and you just really like that person, that professional, there's something that feels so intrinsically good with that exchange of value for service. That's what we're here for. Social, I think just the social contract is that we all agree we rely on one another, and we all have our own expertise and our own services that we offer. And by working together, we sort of support one another, and the experience is better for everyone by leaning on each other. And so I would say that about our Trusted Network. Nothing but love for these businesses, these individuals. They're just phenomenal. And I can't recommend them enough. Everyone should be so lucky to get to have them as the face of who will be part of what ultimately all of us experience, which is learning to accept help, learning where we need it and when we need it, and relying on our community to be able to help us do that when it's too much for any one of us to do this individually. Chris, you're in a different category. You did almost everything. So somehow you were able to do this without crying uncle and asking for too much help. And I'm curious what you think now, having gotten to know some of these Trusted Network members, and your own experience of where you knew to ask for help and maybe where you didn't.
I think the one thing that always surprises me is the heart behind all of these Trusted Network members. I remember the first time I met Jen Bockel and Diane Pagan and Mike Lamagna. Those are the first 3 Trusted Network members that I ever met and sat down with and had a conversation with. And I was just so surprised by how much they actually cared, which I don't know. I maybe that just shows how skeptical I am of people in general. But hearing their stories and hearing how much they actually care about a family and the ways that they go above and beyond what's written on their website, beyond what's written in the testimonials of their website, beyond whatever is written about them on the internet, they truly go above and beyond for these families because they have either experienced it themselves or they just care about what it is that they do. And to be able to spotlight them in a way that they would never spotlight themselves is such a privilege for what I do at tendercare and helping tell the story of tendercare and all these Trusted Network people. It's just such a privilege to be able to be around these people. And from all the time that I've spent with other Trusted Network members, that is the thing that rings true through all of them, is that they just have a heart to serve and they actually care about the people that they're helping.
I know, and it's such a difference, right, from what we hear. Because I think, and I think this is an equal reality. I was talking to, some members of the Special Committee on Aging today, and they're asking our advice, how do we protect, older Americans from fraud, from scams? And they're really worried about this because there are bad actors out there. And it just gives me so much energy when we surround ourselves with all of these incredible professionals who could not be farther from that. And I think the work to do, the job to do, is just to make sure that families don't fall into the hands of those bad actors, and we shepherd them into the hands of the best possible people we already know, we're on first name basis with, before anything bad can happen. That's the trick, is making sure there's one place families know they can go they know it's safe. They know that we've done the work for them of making sure anybody who's on our platform is totally legit, right? And that's kind of that's the work to be done, right? Is making sure it's not just our luxury to be on first name basis with all of these trusted network members. Like every family knows they could be on first name basis with Jen, right? Or Tom Nelson over in Menlo Park, or Dale, right? Yeah, I can see it all, and it's such an amazing and also crazy experience to be in a position in which you can see the grand picture of what this becomes, and also be in the stage where you start in such a small place, right? With just a few who are like, yeah, I buy into this. This is a really good idea. And then it's just a matter of going from that point A to point B and doing the right hard work and not giving up and just staying in the game to get there.
Yeah, one category I'm super excited about with the Trusted Network is the fitness category, or the health. I guess I don't know what we've coined the
Health and
category, but
fitness.
health and fitness, it's my favorite category. I'm a little biased, but it's a huge piece for me. It's something that I actively talk about with my parents because my parents are aging and we're constantly in conversation. More so it's more like debate at this point of like why it's so important to keep up with your health and fitness. Can you talk about Vivo Health and what they do and just your thoughts on this new category?
First, anybody who has exercised before knows the hardest part is just convincing yourself to do it in the first place, and then the best part is afterwards. Like it's just undeniable, the benefits of how this makes you feel, how you move through the world, your strength, you know. And so especially when you think about aging, there's so much to be gained from this. And as coming from, a family of athletes, my dad was a runner. To me, it's really exciting to be bringing on a national partner like Vivo Health, who offers all of these virtual courses for both, seniors and also caregivers to take together. This is so fun. I just wish I had known about this earlier. My dad and I would have loved to do this together. I'm already actively thinking maybe I get my father-in-law to do this with me. Like, this will be so fun. Because you always feel good on the other side of it. And one of the things that I think is really important when thinking about how we approach elder care, aging, caregiving, I really want us to go from being like, shoot, it's a crisis, this is urgent, this is my first time that I'm thinking about this, and it's all in the lens of emergency, into being more proactive, more joyful. And to me, health and fitness really falls in that category. And so this is one of the most incredible services. It's our push into being much more proactive, much more strength building for all of our families who are on our platform, really encouraging everyone. There's no downside, right? From being strong, from actively just carving out a little bit of time for some exercise, for some strength training. There's only upside for that. So I'm so excited, especially since the team at Vivo, they're just world class. Everything is evidence-based. Their trainers are so funny, truly. I've gone through this. Our whole team has gone through one of these classes before. I was like, wait, these dad jokes are hitting. These are good. So it's really fun. And I was actually legitimately sore on the other side of that. They were having us do squats. And I think one of the coolest things about Vivo is they want to bring everybody in. They're so inclusive. They have all of these different series they're running over the summer, like Tai Chi, which is great for it's multi-generational, totally free. I think it's running for the next 4 weeks. We should drop a link into where you can sign up for this. But this is something that I really believe in. I think more strength, more just overall attention to our health has to be a big part of doing this well. Because if we keep waiting till the emergency, we only want to handle this when it's kind of sad and hard, we're just leaving so much on the table with how meaningful and fun and actually connection building what it can look like to caregive. Like, when have you ever thought of, we see all the narrative around caregiving, it's this crisis, it's this tragedy. I would like to put that up against a video of us working out with our parents and like show me the crisis or the tragedy in that. Like that is awesome. And that's something that I hope more families do. And I think points to a different way of thinking about this whole experience as families that we enter into, and adds a lot more on the side of fun, on the side of power for a family. And I want more of that. So we're starting with Vivo. And everybody who is hearing this should take advantage. There's no downside. It's totally free. Check it out for yourself. If, like I said, the hardest part is just agreeing to start. You will 100% feel good about having taken one of these classes. I can tell you myself after having done one.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, the hardest part of any sort of exercise is getting yourself to start. But I think I've never talked to anybody that has ever regretted a workout on the other side of it. So
Yeah, it's just
yeah.
good for you. It's good for you. It's good for us. I think it's also just good for us to be forging these bonds, you know? It's such a mistake that we don't work out together across generations. Why don't we do that? It's crazy. It's the same reason why I think it's so crazy that we spend all of our time playing these team sports all the way up through college, and then most of us stop on the other side. We shouldn't stop teams. It's still a team sport, right? And so
Yeah,
this is a
I
really
think
great way to do it.
some of my early memories with my dad was just being able to play basketball with him and sharing moments of physicality, but also the conversation that would happen in between. So yeah, just giving people the opportunity to do something, an activity like a physical activity with their loved one. I think it's an incredible thing to offer to families.
Well, and that's the whole mission of Tender Care, right? I want to make sure that we are putting these types of services on everybody's radar. They're so good, and there's only upside by knowing about them. Even if, let's say, it's like, okay, it's not for me right now. I'm waiting to get my summer bod like later. I'm not going to do this right now. Just to know about it is half the battle. I had no idea that any of these services existed when I was first starting the caregiving journey with my dad. No clue, right? And so that's part of the exciting piece of this is we're finding all of these different services like Vivo. We just found another that I absolutely love. I think they're going to become a partner, but I'll give them a shout out anyway. Chefs for Seniors. This is the coolest thing. I hope I have a chef when I'm a senior in my house, because God knows I eat enough just like macaroni and cheese and hard-boiled eggs like that. I feel like I've earned it at that point. But the coolest part is they actually come into your home. They prepare heart healthy, very nutritious meals, but they're also spending a lot of time. So whether it's really just socializing, doing cooking classes, that's valuable. That social interaction, that engagement. We know loneliness and isolation is like a real persistent reality for a lot of our loved ones. They're not able to be as mobile or as active, and so they're in their homes, and you don't see everybody as much then. This is another really amazing service I had never heard of before the last week and a half, and I was like, this is so cool. I want to know about all of these services. I want all of our families to know about all these services, because the more they know, the more selection, the more creativity I think everyone can show up with, and starting to think about, what does my golden chapter look like? What do I want to fill it with? What would be really fun and like a really exciting and sort of meaningful way to do this that's uniquely kind of purpose built for me and what makes sense for me? These are the conversations all families should be having, and they should be able to point to things like health and classes together, like chefs coming into the house. That's cool.
I love it. Speaking of programs, we have talked a lot about Guide. Last week on the episode, we talked about Guide and you calling family members to talk about where they are in the process. Recently, we've had some of our team calling people. Can you give an update on what's going on?
This has been such an exciting ride. Chris, you've been helping get the word out there that there's this amazing program for families caring for each other with Alzheimer's and dementia. I mean, I know this is not easy. This we can get all the love we can for this. And so making sure all these families understand, hey, just answer a few questions and you might have thousands of dollars in respite care on the other side of this that you can take advantage of. You can have a go-to person who is like on tap every month helping you problem solve, who can figure out new resources for you, answer questions. This is just cool. And so we've been overwhelmed with the number of families who've come through and are rightly so interested in taking part in this program. And so in true tender care fashion, like nothing is anyone else's problem. We were like, what are we going to do? We've got hundreds of families who now we need to make sure they know whether they're eligible or not. And so we've had like our head of design calling. We've had our head of the trusted network calling families, just making sure we're touching base. We're getting them over the line, as many as we can. And so that's just been a full-on team effort this whole week. We've been actively talking to families, learning the parts that are hard for them. You know, part of the program is we need to enter in, the loved one's Medicare number. Not everybody has this. So helping to problem solve with our families. Okay, well, if you don't have it, that's okay. What are some ways that you can actually get this? You know, so we can help, you get you over the hurdle on these things. So it's been really exciting because one, it's incredibly meaningful to be able to provide these resources to families who deserve it. That just is inherently good, right? And two, we're learning so much. There's so many other programs with more resources for families that I would hope our platform is able to flag and make available to all of our families. And so we're learning a ton that we can then use towards a number of these other programs as we really get this into a place in which we feel good about the process, the experience on the other side. So just a lot of learning on our side, a lot of rolling up our sleeves.
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite parts about being a part of this team is, and I don't even know if you can consider this scrappy, because I don't know if picking up the phone to call families is considered scrappy. But to me, I guess you could argue that it is, because we are considered a team building tech, and to pick up the phone to physically call these families is scrappy in a way. And I love that. And I love that we're always willing to go above and beyond whatever is beyond what is supposed to be done. Just always being willing to go a step above.
I mean, that's the best kind of team to spend your time with, right? I can't imagine being part of anything else. That's the that's the caregiver approach, right? I think we're called to this because that makes so much sense to us. There's no job too small or below us to do to get it done. If it's something that can be done, our team will do it. And, and sometimes that means just getting on the phone or doing data entry or, and I think having that level of humility is something that carries with us forever. I don't ever want us to lose that, because in many ways, I think that's an indicator of the type of culture we're building here, a service-oriented culture around how we think about delivering for our families. And there's going to be no job too hard or, too kind of complicated for us to be able to solve for them. That's the goal. And the cool part is going to be how we build and learn to be able to do those jobs even better and smarter and faster for families. And sometimes there's no shortcuts. The only way to get started is just to actually just jump in there and try and figure it out. And then you get smarter over time. So I love that, Chris. And I would say you reflect the same. You're ready to jump in at any moment, and that's part of the fun. I think if this was a group of people who were constantly sort of turning their nose up at jobs being too difficult or too beneath anyone, I don't think tender care would have ever even gotten started.
Yeah, I think a byproduct of getting your hands dirty, quote unquote, is building stronger conviction for realizing there's a family on the other side of this thing that we're doing here. Like, I remember when I first joined the team and we started giving out tender IDs, I remember my entire family was packing hundreds of tender IDs at our dinner table, and we were looking at all of the names and the families that these are going to, and there's part of it because of you're physically holding this thing that's going out to somebody. You remember that this is a real family that you're servicing.
I know. And that's just refuels my tank every time. We had an amazing, we had an amazing woman write in today just talking about when she checked in with her mom around a severe storm. One of our features is, allowing families to know when there's, scary weather coming to one of their loved ones, might be out of state. And hearing the stories of those moments of connection, how grateful her mom was that her daughter was thinking about her and was, even when she's not in the same state, keeping tabs on whether or not she's okay. That's beautiful. I hope one day my daughter's checking in on me. Like, Mom, there's a storm coming. Are you okay? Do you need anything? Like, that's the best, right? And so it's really nice when we get to spend time with all of the families who are actively on the platform, and you can put a face to a name and you can hear the stories of the ways that they're being able to demonstrate care to one another via the tools that we're building for them.
Love it. Last thing for you, Shauna. Was there anything that you heard this week aside from that story? Anything that you learned from the team or from a family, from a trusted network member that really stuck with you this week?
Mm. It's hard because I hear so many things that stick with me. I feel like I'm just like, I've got all these like really amazing gifts. I got to think about which is the one that really stood out. Hmm. You know, there was a really interesting insight. Like, of course, there's like some really amazing things when we hear that our families are using our platform. And so maybe I'll cheat. I'll share two. There's a husband and wife couple that wrote in, and they had heard about us, tendercare, the platform, and they were skeptical. Like, hey, I don't know if this can be of use. I'm not sure. And then they had ordered a tender ID and started to use our app for being able to take care of one another. They're married, and they had said it was such a life changer for them. And then they said, God bless. And this is an older couple. They're caring for one another, and they had taken the time to be able to let us know how we had impacted them and how we had kind of overcome their suspicions, right? Of, how useful are we? Are we really here to help them? I thought that was really beautiful. And I was so touched that they had taken the time to write in. Like, I'm so busy. I can barely remember to order the right groceries. So like anytime someone takes the moment to write in and say something nice, I'm like, whoa, that's huge. So that's like the first one. The second one is actually around just how big our mission is. And I was talking to a friend because so much of what we are building is always tied to next milestones. Like, what's the next big thing that we need to hit? What's the next feature we're going to launch? What's the next, big milestone of amount of families served? And so it's like constantly looking forward. And this friend of mine who's like incredibly wise, what she said was, it's also really important just to think about today. What is the version of the world that you are actively working on with this other group of individuals and representing in the world today? And I really liked that because it was a real refocus on what it means to be present and what it means to think about our impact today. That's really important for me. Just as a human, I don't tend to think about that. And so I liked the reframe. And the last one, I know I'm completely cheating because you asked me to do one, is talking to the Special Committee on Aging. And we explained our business model to them, how we work, how we keep the lights on. We give all of our tools for free to families. We ask providers to pay us to allow us to vet them, to audit them, to make sure that they're in fact trustworthy. And she said to me, I think tender care might be the blueprint for how we should think about elder care. And coming from the government, that's pretty cool to hear. They see all kinds of different models and makes me really hopeful about what we are bringing into the world. I think there's just so much power in that. There's so much impact that there's left to be done by this group, by others who are coming in as allies for us. So I'm just really hopeful and really excited by a number of the different signals I'm seeing for what does our impact really look like when we kind of take it out of this black and white zone and start to look at it from so many different angles.
Amazing. I'm so glad you brought up that line. I was hoping you would have said it.
Yeah, I was like, that's so badass. I'm so excited that that is being acknowledged. We've really fought hard to come up with a new model that is a win for everybody. You know, I know from our very beginning, one of our North Stars were we needed to sign off on the version of the world and what it would look like if tender care became incredibly successful, right? And what does that world look like? Does that feel good to have brought into the world? Will we regret it? And because of that, we spent so much time on our business model, so much time. Like we were probably even a little like slower than we should have been because of that. Because we didn't want to start building in the wrong direction and ultimately building something that didn't serve families. And so I'm so proud of us being the blueprint